Well, we are in the 22nd session of 24 of the book of Genesis. So we're going to tackle chapters 40 and following. We've committed 3 sessions. This is the second of 3 sessions on Joseph. We went through the first 11 chapters, which are considered prehistory by many scholars. But from chapter 12 on, we're into the patriarchs. And we could sense a real shifting of gears, so to speak, when we went from chapter 11 to 12. And as we got through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as we get to Joseph, the style isn't that different, and yet it's quite a fantastic narrative that we just introduced last time. And we'll have tonight and next session to finish that, and then the following session we'll wrap up the whole book and review prophetically all the 12 tribes. Jacob does that, and we'll use that as a springboard to talk a little further about the 12 tribes that make up the nation. Last session we talked about Joseph, who had these strange dreams, a pair of them specifically, as a child that offended his brothers and so forth. We also had inserted in the series this bizarre chapter 38 with Judah and his sin with Tamar, and we went behind the text there, looked at some of the encrypted aspects of that, which also involved a review of the book of Ruth, which we sort of inserted. But then Joseph, of course, because of the envy of his brothers and so forth, gets captured and sold to the slave traders and ends up in Egypt. That's where we left off last time. So we are in chapter 40, and Joseph is in Egypt. So, and you may recall when he was acquired by Potiphar, who's the chief of the executioners and so forth. His wife tried to get him to have an affair with her, and he refused, and she spread slander about him, which caused him to get thrown into prison. And so that's where we pick up the narrative in chapter 40, verse 1. It came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt, this is a makeh, he's like a drink giver. He's like the wine steward in a sense. The butler of the king of Egypt and his baker, he was this guy that was the superintendent of the bakery. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Both of these guys are right at the elbow of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And what typically was involved, by the way, is they were probably also tasters. You may recall when you get to the book of Nehemiah, that Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king. That wasn't just a menial thing. It was 2 things. He would make sure he tasted everything before the king did. That's a responsibility. But also became very intimate with the king. The king did Nehemiah a lot of key favors. But in any case, this butler and this baker had offended the king. So they're in trouble. And pending their full investigation, they're thrown into prison. And it's the same prison, of course, where Joseph is. And this is going to be very pivotal in the career of our friend Joseph. Verse 2, and Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers, and he put them in the ward of the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and served them, and they continued a season in the war. Now this is interesting. Here's Joseph, a prisoner himself. When he was a slave, purchased by Potiphar, and Potiphar recognized in him talent, apparently, because he put him in charge of his own household. Quite an honor for a slave to have that kind of a position. Of course, his wife tried to take advantage of it, and that's what got Joseph in big trouble. Now here again, he's in prison, and the head of the prison, again, puts the administration of things into Joseph's hands. This tells you a lot about Joseph. This guy is a guy with a lot of aptitude. So anyway, these 2 guys that are in prison there, they dreamed a dream, both of them. That's the baker and the butler and the baker. Each man his dream in one night. So this is strange. In one night, both of these guys had a dream. Each man, according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in prison. You know, it's interesting. This episode we're going to see here will be repeated centuries later in Babylon, where a young teenager by the name of Daniel gets the attention of the king because the king had a troubling dream, and his own experts couldn't make head or tail of it. In fact, his requirement was that they would have to recall the dream. He didn't even tell them what it was. But anyway, and of course, that's what propels Daniel to power. And Daniel's another one of these guys because he rises to power twice. In the Babylonian world, when that gets conquered by the Persians, he ascends in the hierarchy to be the third ruler of the world. Both Joseph and Daniel seem to be very similar in a certain way. Both Daniel and Joseph had two things in common. They're both, in effect, what we would call executives. And they're both guys about whom there is no evil spoken of. Excepting Jesus Christ, and excepting those two, almost everybody else you encounter in Scripture stumbles or has a problem or there's something about them. Daniel and Joseph both are spotless in the sense of the record, and both have that in common. Anyway, so we have these two guys, the butler and baker, have a troubling dream. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. They were upset. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. It's interesting. Let's try to put ourselves in Joseph's mind. Joseph can remember when he was a kid, he had these dreams, and he was able to interpret them and so forth. And again, when he was a kid, there were two dreams. And here again, we are faced with two dreams. And we're going to shortly discover Pharaoh will have later two dreams. So it's kind of interesting. There's a pattern here. And I would imagine the person most sensitive to that pattern would be Joseph himself. But in any case, Chief Butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. And it was as though it budded, and her blossom shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. A pretty straightforward dream, especially for a butler, it would think. But again, 3 branches and so forth. What's going on here? So Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. And so that's pretty straightforward. It's interesting. Something you could do on your own is take the 3-day thing and trace it through the Bible. It's really remarkable how often that shows up. You remember Abraham took 3 days bringing Isaac to Mount Moriah for the offering of Isaac back in chapter 22 of Genesis. Jonah will spend 3 days in the belly of the great fish. And Jesus, in fact, will make reference to that, focusing on his own 3 days in the tomb. So it's kind of interesting. I personally suspect, for reasons I'll show you as we go, that when Joseph's brothers put him in that pit, that cistern, that he was in there 3 days. And that always was just a suspicion of mine, but as I was preparing for this lesson, I saw some things in the text which caused me it seemed to underscore that very concept. As we'll go, we'll take a look at that. So anyway, the butler has his dream, Joseph interprets it, and the butler, of course, is pleased. That means in 3 days he's going to get back to where he was and everything will be fine. But then Joseph gives the butler a request. He sort of says, hey, I did you a favor, you owe me one. He says, but think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. Rather reasonable request. He says, for indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. And by the way, I think I mentioned it last time, I have a view, doesn't mean it's correct, that Potiphar didn't believe his wife. The wife accused him of trying to put the make on her. If he had believed her, he would have had him killed. He was the chief of the executioners. But he threw him. He probably had to do something to save face or whatever. But I think, in my mind at least, he probably recognized. He probably knew his wife for what she was. But let's move on. We got another guy here now. And this guy's got a little bigger a problem. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream. And behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for the Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Now, a couple of things about this. The style apparently was that the baked meats, as they call them, were carried in baskets, and the baskets typically were carried on a person's head between the bakery and the dining area. And in crossing these open courts, they were vulnerable to birds of various kinds coming down and helping themselves. So that was a situation. And the risk of these kinds of things were greater in the cities of Egypt because they were held sacred. It was unlawful to destroy them, the birds, that is. So they're a nuisance, you see. And so, in any case, they often swarmed and they were an annoyance. This is the background here. There is one thing I'll show. I won't get into exegetical stuff too much. The translations is not a big deal, but where it says 3 white baskets, the word is kori, which can mean white. It also can mean full of holes. It also can mean full of holes. I'll come back to that in a minute. It can be either one. And when it say, some commentators who catch that say, well, gee, it probably means the baskets had full of holes, like they were wicker baskets. That's one possibility. But if the wine and the bread are prophetic, as I'm going to suggest they are, I'll call your attention to that the matzah is always full of holes. I wouldn't make too much of that. It could be a coincidence. Let's move on. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. He probably should have said, baker, fasten your seatbelt. Are you ready for this? You really want to know? Okay. This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets, again, are 3 days. And within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off of thee and hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. It's my suspicion that this really wasn't what the baker wanted to hear. Okay. The language of Joseph here, by the way, describes rather minutely a form of capital punishment that prevailed in Egypt. Namely, the criminal was decapitated, and then his headless body was gibbeted on a tree by the highway until it was gradually devoured by ravenous birds. There are records of that. Pretty grisly, but that was the point. That's the way they made an example, if you will. And so, interestingly enough, that seems to be very consistent with what Joseph is interpreting from this dream. Well, it came to pass on the 3rd day. See, both these guys had a 3-day window, didn't they? It came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And by the way, make a couple of remarks here. On the Rosetta Stone, you may recall, roughly the time of Napoleon, they found a stone near Rosetta, that's why they call it the Rosetta Stone, that has the same story written in 3 different ways. And because it's 3 different languages, it was the key to the hieroglyphics and the rest, because they can interpolate. But and we talk about that in our book on cryptography. But the point is, what's interesting, in the Rosetta Stone, it mentions that the pharaohs had a custom of releasing prisoners on his birthday. So I just remember that. I thought that would be useful because it's consistent with our narrative here. So he takes the butler and restores him to his office, which obviously he was well pleased. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted them. Now watch out for that word hanged, because that's often misunderstood. You and I think of someone hanging in the fashion of the Old West, a noose around a tree and whatever. We find that in the book of Esther with Haman and the gallows, remember? It turns out, especially in the case of Haman, because that was a Persian setting, he wasn't hung with a rope, he was crucified. He was nailed to a tree, okay? And here too, when it says hanged, he's hung on a tree after probably being decapitated, like the dream described, or like Joseph described. So watch out for that word hanged, because especially in the Esther account, You can see from the translator's presumptions that that's what they visualized. Yet when you get into the actual language and the background, you realize it's a little different. But also, it turns out, especially in the Haman thing, anticipatory of the cross, and you can study that in our Esther commentary. But let's go here. So he hanged the chief baker, and Joseph interpreted him. Now you can imagine the chief butler. He's restored to office. 3 days ago, Joseph told him that was what was going to happen. You think he'd be pleased as can be. But you know, there's something very strange about good news. We take it for granted. It isn't very long, and we sort of feel we deserved it. Don't ever underestimate the human being's capacity to rationalize whatever. So, remember, Joseph said, hey, just do me a favor, remember me. Do you think the chief butler did? Not for 13 years. Can you imagine? Approximately, at least that's the inference we draw. And yet did not the chief butler, did not remember Joseph, but he forgot him. And therein lies the close of this chapter. I want to highlight a couple things. When you go through the Bible, one thing I want to sensitize you to, be sensitive to the fact that we're dealing with 66 books, penned by 40 different guys over thousands of years, that are an integrated message. Watch for proofs of that. You'll discover not just the content in the primary sense, but even the subtleties are all interconnected. You'll recognize that it is the real source is a single author, and that author is outside time altogether. You remember when we were in Genesis 14, remember Melchizedek? When Abraham comes to him after the victory over the 9 kings and all that, Melchizedek administers to Abraham. What things? Bread and wine. Bread and wine. Here we have in Genesis 40, again, a baker and a wine steward. And of course, at the Last Supper, we have the bread and the wine. And of course, because of that, of course, we have communion, as Paul emphasizes in 1 Corinthians 11 and so on. So, interesting to see that thread all the way through. It's interesting to remember that Jesus in his resurrection body, after his resurrection, is always eating. I love that. And also recognize that he's finishing that meal. The last cup he didn't finish, he's going to drink that with us if you watch it through. Let's get to the next chapter. Chapter 41. Now we're going to move now. You tend, when you read the Bible, to assume 41 follows chapter 40, of course. Yes, but there's an interval in here that you may be oblivious to of more than 10 years, probably about 12 or 13. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years, the Pharaoh dreamed. Now that's 2 full years since the baker thing, but not 2. In other words, we know from what later on when we look back that Joseph was in there for quite a while. It was a total of 13 years from the time he's sold until the time he gets reinstated. That's what I really should say. It doesn't say he's in jail all that time because we don't know how long he was serving. But that's anyway. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. This is the first of 2 dreams. It's going to give Pharaoh a great deal of distress, especially since the wise men of Egypt could not unravel this, could not explain them. We'll discover when we get down to verse 8. The wise men couldn't unravel this. God used an Israelite slave to confound the wisdom of Egypt. And it'll be later that another Moses, that Pharaoh will be at the mercy of this God. But let's move on. The ill-favored kine and the lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine, and so Pharaoh woke up. It so disturbed him, he actually woke up out of his sleep. Have you ever had dreams like that? That are so whatever that you actually wake up from them? Well, and he slept and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh woke, and behold, it was a dream. It was a dream. And the word rank there, by the way, really means fat, rich. But anyway, okay. It's not the way you may think. In verse 8, it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. That verse kind of puzzles me, because I've never seen a wise man or a magician that couldn't dream up some kind of explanation. But in any case, they obviously didn't cut it. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh. See, this triggers a memory here. I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream one night, I and he, and we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of the dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him. And he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. The Pharaoh sent and called Joseph. They brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. That was the custom, by the way. We know from other records that part of the Egyptian thing was to be totally shaven and cleaned up and, of course, changing the raiment and so forth. He came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. You know, that's a neat line. That's exactly what Daniel did to his supervisor in Babylon. There's a real parallel between this narrative and Daniel chapter 2, when this young teenager who has been a hostage, in effect, for Nebuchadnezzar, tells his boss, the word's gone out to kill all the guys in his job description. Say, wait. You know, I can't do it either, but our God can, and so forth. And that's exactly the way he grandstands it to Nebuchadnezzar. I can't do this, God did, but here's the answer, and so forth. Anyway, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. Now, by the way, in this case, there's a difference, because Pharaoh tells him what the dream was. Daniel didn't have that advantage. God told him what the dream was. That's what so impressed Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was doing this to find out if his advisors really had any real capability here. And, of course, Daniel upstages that. Getting back here. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored, as at the beginning. So I awoke. And this is it's too bad I didn't get some snapshots of Egypt, because in the shallow rivers, that's often where you see the cattle or coming out of the waist-deep water or whatever. Anyway, I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears, withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprang up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. It's interesting how Joseph continually underscores, puts up front, that this is God's show, not his. That tells you a lot about Joseph. Even though he has been abused, he obviously, as he's had many, many hours to ponder, why am I here? My father's sons have sold me into slavery. I find myself in this strange land as a slave, and there, through no fault of my own, by trying to be faithful, I'm in prison. You can imagine this kid is probably having a tough time keeping things in perspective, and yet he does. There's never any evidence that he has any impatience. He just trusts God that somehow this is all in God's... He figures he's in God's hands, it's God's problem. Boy, if we could have that same attitude. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do, he says, verse 25. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good years are 7 years. The dream is one. In my English, I think I'd say the dreams, plural, are one, but all right. Anyway, and the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. By the way, the Hebrew actually says heavy. And so what our young people, I say, this is a heavy dude. It's a heavy deal. And for the dream, the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. You know, I think that's interesting because there's these 2 versions here. It seemed in Joseph's mind that underscored its authenticity, having come from God, and that it would be carried out soon. And there must have been several things on Joseph's mind. There were 2 dreams when he was a kid. There's been 2 imprisonments. He was in the cistern and now here. And there's been 2 dreamers in prison. They each had a dream, and now Pharaoh has 2 dreams. The duplex pattern all the way through, I'm sure, must have been something that Joseph was conscious of. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. And now therefore, now get this kid. He's telling the ruler of the world what to do. I love this, you know. Now therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 good years, plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. One of the lessons here, though, that Joseph is espousing is that wise planning ahead is a basic principle of practical living. For Egypt, of course, it's obvious there. It's also obvious, maybe less well attended to in our own lives. And Joseph continues, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Well, obviously you see what's coming. Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Wow. This is where, again, there's a parallel between him and Daniel. Daniel was pretty much in the same boat twice, the Babylonian Empire, and equivalent to that also in the Persian Empire, for much the same reason. Joseph had been faithful in the little things, so God is now giving him an opportunity to become ruler over all the land of Egypt, which it was the dominant empire on the planet Earth at that time. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, his signet. And he arrayed him in vestures of fine linen. And he put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Bow the knee is the way the King James translators translated it. It's abrecht, which is an Egyptian term. It doesn't really refer to prostration. According to some authors, it really meant father, and to others, native prince. And what they believe it really was intended to convey is naturalizing him as a Hebrew among the Egyptians. In other words, by the intent of that salute, that announcement, was that the Egyptians were put on notice to regard him as like a son of Pharaoh. He's not a slave. He's not a Hebrew. He's an Egyptian, so to speak. What popped in my mind, I remember when John F. Kennedy was in Germany, when it was a divided Germany. Ich bin ein Berliner. Remember, he said that that was his way of identifying with the German people. Same kind of thing. And what's interesting about this, here's Joseph, from a slave in a dungeon to the number 2 ruler of their world in a day. Boy, what difference a day makes. You can't help but remember also what Mordecai said to Esther when he was trying to point out her potential leverage for the nation Israel. He says, "Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" God was not doing this just as a great big favor for Joseph. He's doing this because the destiny of his people was being planned for. And not just for food, but to bring them together in a context where they could be taken care of, separated, and they went in as a family. They went into Egypt as a family, and they will come out as a nation. And that's really what's forming. In fact, the nation Israel was born as a nation in the first 2 chapters of Exodus. Pharaoh continues, Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah. And Joseph said, thanks a lot, fella. No. They're not sure what the word means. According to some Coptic scholars, it signifies a revealer of secrets. And another version of the same kind of thing says it's a man to whom secrets are revealed. Those are conjectures by people who have familiarity with the linguistic background. But again, they're just conjectures. There's not agreement on this. But also as a token of his new status, it says that he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. So the priestly family was in a place called On, and a city which was the center of the sun worship in about 7 miles north of Cairo, and also known as Heliopolis, by the way. And they will, the Israelites will domicile in a land called Goshen, which is the eastern part of the Nile Delta. It's the choicest piece of ground in Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Now remember, he was 17 when they sold him into slavery. That's where I got the 13. I didn't mean to imply that it was all in prison, but the point is that's a long time to be, in the penalty box of whatever kind. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, and that was substantial. In the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by the handfuls, and he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. This allusion is also in the Psalms. In Psalm 105, starting about verse 16 through about verse 22, it reads as follows. In the Psalm, moreover, speaking of God, he called for a famine upon the land. He brake the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them, even Joseph, who was sold for a servant, whose feet they hurt with fetters. He was laid in iron. See, that's a detail that's not in Genesis, but you do pick it up in the Psalms. Until the time that his word came, the word of the Lord tried him. And the king sent and loosed him, even the ruler of the people, and let him go free. And he made him lord of his house and ruler over all his substance, to bind his princes at his pleasure, and teach his senators wisdom. So this Hebrew slave is even teaching the learned of Egypt. So this kid has done well. So let's pick him up again in chapter 41 at verse 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For God said, he hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the Manasseh implies forgetfulness, if you will. The name of the second he called Ephraim. For God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And Ephraim implies fruitfulness. And so these are the 2 sons. Now they're going to be very, very important for a very surprising reason. when Jacob ultimately sees them, meets with them, Jacob will adopt them as his own. That's why you have tribes called Manasseh and Ephraim. They're both together, they could be called the tribe of Joseph. And the only place I can think of offhand where that is done is the book of Revelation. It deals with the pair. In fact, there it even deals with them together. It mentions Manasseh and then the tribe of Joseph. In other words, what's left, which would be Ephraim. So there's some reasons it does it that way. But anyway, the net of it is that these two sons then, because Joseph will accede to the role of the firstborn, in a sense. Because Reuben blew it by that concubine business. We'll go through all this when the time comes. So the firstborn gets a double portion. So the way Joseph gets the benefit as if he was the firstborn, and he was the firstborn of Rachel in that sense, right? But he gets a double portion for his two sons, in effect. Are we together? Okay. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. The 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. This famine was very widespread. That was part of its role, because we're going to discover the people back in Hebron are starving. And that's what's going to drive the brothers. But God had some things to do with those brothers before they were ready for what was coming. They had to be tested. They had to be tried in some very interesting ways. And we'll see how Joseph does this. When all the land of Egypt was famished, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, and what he saith to you, do. See, Joseph had stockpiled all this stuff. He didn't give it out. He sold it to them to Pharaoh's account. And that's the way Pharaoh ends up owning Egypt. Okay, it's another side light to this whole thing that doesn't come up quite so clearly. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. So this really makes it for Egypt, of course. And that ends that chapter. Chapter 42. We're now going to see the brothers' first visit in a general category I'll call the move to Egypt. Chapter 42. Now when Jacob, we're back in Hebron now, when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look one upon another? He said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy from us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. Boy, you can just see this coming, can't you? This is one of the most interesting dramas you can structure here. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, understand these, they're all brothers, but the others are half-brothers. Benjamin is his full brother. All the rest of these guys are obviously the ones that sold him into slavery in the first place. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. You know, this interests me. The fact that Jacob refuses to let the young one go gives you the clue that he probably had his sons figured out. He knew these guys were rascals. He couldn't prove it, but he didn't trust them. He didn't trust them. Joseph's fate had not come to light yet, of course, but the brothers' characteristics were certainly known to their father. And he was afraid that harm might fall upon Benjamin too. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Oh, love this. Does that remind you of a dream he had when he was a kid? See, it's all becoming fulfilled. Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them. See, he knew them, obviously. But when you put it all together, they had no way of knowing him, because there've been 13 years gone by. Furthermore, he looks different. He's an Egyptian, array and so forth. And furthermore, he made himself strange to them deliberately. He said unto them, Whence come ye? He doesn't say this directly. He does it through an interpreter, of course. He's speaking Egyptian. They're speaking Hebrew. But whence come ye? He said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And boy, that sets the stage for some fun here. Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and he said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. Now, the He's accusing him of a spy. Their vulnerable border was that way. And so this was a very natural thing for him to be suspicious of. It's not contrived. But he's obviously doing this for his own purposes. And Joseph, you need to realize where Joseph is coming from. He understands there's a fulfillment of prophecy. He also understands that the family is destined to come down there under his rulership. But he has some things that have to be done, and he's going to go at it in a very, very interesting way. So he's accusing him of being spies. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's son. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. Meaning one has died, in fact. Later on, Jacob's going to scold him. Why'd you tell me you had a younger brother? He's going to catch it for that. But the Egyptians have a fear of what they consider the Asiatic peoples coming from the east. And so this would be these spies. They could be there to see out where are the weak defenses and so forth. And so to give information to the would-be invaders and so forth. That's the thing behind it. And so Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come here. Now why is he saying that? Well, partly to test them, because he's got an errand to do for the Lord here, testing them. But also he'd like to have his true brother down here, see? Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh surely ye are spies. So he's going to put them all in the belief that they're going to be in prison. I want you to notice how long do you think they'll be in prison? Take a look at this. And he put them all together into a ward 3 days. See, I think in his own mind, he's doing a parallel. They put him in a cistern for 3 days. So now he's turned the tables on them. They're in prison for 3 days. But then the third day he changes the program here. Joseph said unto them on the third day, This do and live, for I fear God. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses. But bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. In other words, the idea is, okay, I won't send one. I'll keep one and let all you guys go. That's his change of, that's his form of leniency here. But they got a problem, of course. They said one to another. Now, notice, they're talking to themselves. They don't realize he can understand them. But they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. They don't recognize that it's Joseph doing this, but they recognize the parallel. They assume that God is giving them their just due for the way they treated their brother. You follow me? They're analyzing this here. And then Reuben. Now Reuben, he's the guy that was trying to get mercy, remember? Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. They knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. See, they assumed he was Egyptian, couldn't understand Hebrew. And so at this point, Joseph can't handle it either. He turned himself about from them and wept. Now, when turned about, not just turned around, he went into a separate chamber where he could, be private. Then he returned to them again and communed with them and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Now, Simeon was required to remain in prison. He was Jacob's second son, and tradition holds that he was the most cruel of all the brothers. That's the impression you get from at least the scholars. But anyway, he took Simeon, bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and now this is what they didn't know, and to restore every man's money into his sack. The money that they purchased all this stuff. But Joseph has their purchase price, the cash, put back in their sacks without their knowledge. And to give them provision for the way. And this he did unto them. So this is called entrapment. Okay? And they laded their asses with the corn and departed thence. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender, and see, in the inn, they're en route now. They're staying overnight someplace. He's going to feed one of his donkeys. And he said, he espied his money, and behold, it was in his sack's mouth. And he said to his brethren, my money is restored. Look, it is even in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, what is this that God has done to us? See, this is not a blessing. They realize that they are in trouble. This is, it's sort of like these stories you see where one of these robbers rob a small bank only to discover it's a mafia drop. Now they're the feds we can handle, but not those guys. That kind of thing. Well, so they realize they are somehow they don't understand how it happened, but they recognize they're in big soup. So anyway, they come home. They came to Jacob their father unto the land of Canaan and told him all that befell them, saying, the man who is the Lord of the land spake roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said unto him, we are true men, and we are no spies. We be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food to the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me, then shall I know that ye are no spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver you, your brother, and ye shall traffic in the land. So that's their, It came to pass as they emptied their sacks, and behold, every man's bundle of money was in a sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. This is not a blessing, it's a problem for them. And Jacob their father said unto them, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not, and ye will take Benjamin away? All these things are against me. Which in two words, Jacob's saying, no way. I've lost Joseph. For all practical purposes, I've lost Simeon, and I'm not going to let you take Benjamin. So Jacob is not going to go along with this thing, which gives them a huge problem because the food's going to run out, obviously. Reuben spoke unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. That's his deal. Reuben offers a pretty good deal here. And Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So he's just not going to do it. So that ends that brings us to their second visit, because obviously the food eventually runs out, and we have time for this. Let's go ahead. The famine was sore in the land, and it came to pass that when they had eaten up the corn which they had bought out of Egypt, their father said to them, go again and buy us a little food. Oh, yeah? And Judah spake unto him, saying, the man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel, or Jacob, said, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother? Jacob, he's scolding them. They hadn't mentioned the younger brother. He wouldn't be in the soup. What he's trying to do is avoid the decision only he can make. The problem is very simple. You got to decide to let him go or not, but don't blame them, guys. It's Jacob's problem. They said, the man asked us straightly of our state and of our kindred, saying, is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of those words. Could we certainly know that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah said unto Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be a surety, this is Judah speaking now, I will be a surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him, if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee. Then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we would have returned the second time. So in other words, it's time to get going here, guys. Judah is laying it on it. And it's kind of interesting. He's trying to break the deadlock of this family tension. He was Jacob's 4th son, you may recall. And he apparently will succeed where Reuben has failed. And Benjamin will, of course, go down with the brothers. It's interesting. Judah was the one that came up with the plan to sell Joseph in the first place, back there in chapter 37. Now he is the one that has to negotiate with the father to get Benjamin to go. So their father Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land of your vessels and carry down the man a present, a little balm, a little honey, spices, and myrrh and nuts and almonds. And take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carried again in your hand, peradventure, it was an oversight. So they're going to try to take the choicest fruits and the rarest nuts as a gift and so forth. And I assume that these things were probably not that readily available in Egypt. It puzzles me a little bit because they're in a famine, and yet they do have some of these nice things there. But again, they're not substantive in terms of their livelihood. And so take also your brother and arise and go again to the man, and God Almighty, El Shaddai, if you will, give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. You can always hear the Jewish shrug there, can't you? And the men took that present, and they took the double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and he rose up, went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. It's interesting that Jacob prays to God Almighty, El Shaddai. That's the God that will provide all our needs. That's really what that word emphasizes, that particular label. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, bring these men home and slay and make ready, meaning, prepare, roast, and so on, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. That's got to make them uncomfortable. They wonder what's going on here. Yeah, and the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. They said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time when we were brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for bondmen and our asses. So they're frightened. They think they're going to be captured. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house and said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food, and it came to pass when we came to the inn that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of the sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. He's trying to lay this right out front, see? The other money we have brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks. Now notice what the steward tells them. And he said, peace be unto you, and fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. And he brought Simeon out unto them. It's kind of interesting because the steward is talking to them about their God. That tells you that Joseph obviously had tutored his own steward about the living God. You miss that unless you stop and think about it. The steward is putting these guys at ease, but he's doing so in terms that implies he has understanding who the God of Jacob is. The man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet and gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph, came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present that was in their hand unto the house and bowed themselves to him to the earth. There again, we have the fulfillment of Joseph's dream. Okay, second time. And he asked them of their welfare and said, is your father well? The old man of whom ye spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. So bear in mind, he's the full brother of Joseph, of whom he spake. He says, is this your younger brother of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn for his brother. No, his guts are churning on this one. And he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. Joseph couldn't handle it. He had to slip away to handle this. The emotions are running high here. They're just beginning. He washed his face, went out and refrained himself and said, set on bread. Now, notice what he has arranged here. They set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with them by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him. Now get this, they're seated at this banquet table, their special own table. They sat before him the firstborn according to his birthright, the youngest according to his youth. The men marveled one another. You'd think they would get a clue here. How on earth would this stranger know them well enough to put them in the proper family order? I don't know if they had place cards, how they were, but anyway. Furthermore, it gets even worse. Next verse. And he took and sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank, and they were merry with him. And the word merry means drank largely. But in any case, this is you'd think they'd get a clue, but they haven't got a clue. It's going to be fun. Chapter 44. Joseph's got to do some testing. These were the guys that sold him to slavery. He's got to find out where they're really at. He commanded the steward of his house, saying, "Fill the men's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in the sack's mouth." You're going to do the same stunt again, see? "And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money." And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. So again, he has set this up, but he's added this cup thing in Benjamin's sack, see? "As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, and their asses. And when they were gone out of the city, and were not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, Up, follow after the men, and when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, Wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? Is not this it in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby indeed he divineth? Ye have done evil in so doing." See, we got Joseph's private cup here, which he not only drinks from, but he's creating the impression. I don't think he really did, but he creates the impression they use it for divining, see. There was a form called hydromancy, where you put in a cup some silver flakes or gold flakes or some precious stones, and you shake it, and then by interpreting like tea leaves, you would foretell the future. That was a form of divination. So cups were used for that in some cultures. So he's trying to give them the impression that this is a very special cup that they've gone off with. See. So anyway, he overtook them, and he spake unto them these same words. And they said to him, "Wherefore saith my Lord these words? God forbid that thy servant should do according to this thing. Behold, the money which we found in our sack's mouth we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of my Lord's house silver or gold?" In other words, he's speaking of an earlier trip. And notice what they said. "Whomsoever of thy servants it be found, let him die, and we also will be thy Lord's bondmen." See, they're bluffing this through because they know they haven't stolen anything, right? Wrong. And he said, Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my servant, and ye shall be blameless. Okay? Then they speedily took down every man his sack to the ground, and opened every man his sack. And he searched. Now notice what the steward's been well briefed. He starts with the oldest, works his way down to the youngest. He's building tension. Okay? He began at the eldest, left at the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's. Can you just see that? You want to write the screenplay for this, don't you? Now, can you imagine their shock when they find the Pharaoh's own cup in their youngest sack? They can hear. They can already hear in their ears Jacob's screaming at them. Then they rent their clothes, and laded every man his ass, and returned to the city. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there. And they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that ye have done? Watch ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine?" He's really putting it on. Judah said, and this is, Judah said, "What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? How shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found." And he said, "God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father." Then Judah came near unto him. See, Joseph is playing this out, but Judah is trying to deal with it. Judah came near unto him and said, "O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. And let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servant, saying, Have ye a father or a brother?" I should mention, this is going to be one of the most eloquent passages in literature. Sir Walter Scott said of this, what we're going to read here, it's the most complete pattern of genuine, natural eloquence extant in any language. That was Sir Walter Scott's assessment of this. It's a remarkable intercession that Judah is going to put forth here. And as he pled with this Egyptian official for the life and freedom of Benjamin. And this spirit of self-sacrifice you're hearing out of Judah is a long way from the Judah of 13 years ago. And that's what Joseph is trying to He's putting them to the test. This whole charade is very colorful, tremendous drama, but it has a very critical purpose. From God's point of view, either they are the brothers that God is going to build a nation out of, or he'll start a fresh one under Joseph. That's sort of the tone of this whole situation. So Judah continues, "My Lord asked his servants, have you a father or brother? And we said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. And thou didst say unto thyself, bring him down unto me, that I may set mine eyes upon him. And we said unto my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. And thou saidst to thy servants, except thou youngest brother come down with you, ye shall see my face no more. And it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go again and buy us a little food. And we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother be with us. If our youngest brother be with us, then we shall go down. But we may not see the man's face, except our youngest brother be with us. And thy servant, my father, said unto us, ye know that my wife bare 2 sons. The one went from me, and I said, surely he is torn into pieces, for I saw him not since. And if ye take this also from me, and mischief befall him, ye shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to thy servant with my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass, when he seeth that the lad is not with us, he will die. And my servant shall bring down the gray hairs of thy servant our father with sorrow to the grave. For thy servant became surety for the lad unto my father, saying, if I bring him not unto thee, then I shall bear the blame to my father forever. Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father? Quite a speech. No protestation of innocence, no excuses, just a plain, unabashed thing. So now Jacob and Joseph, it's interesting to contrast Jacob and Joseph, just to give you a little summary here. Both narratives begin with the father being deceived and the brothers being treacherous. Both Jacob and Joseph, okay? Both include a 20-year period of separation. The younger brother in a foreign land. Jacob, chapter 31. Joseph, of course, here. 13 years in Potiphar's house, in prison from the age 17 to 30, in effect. And the contrast, chapter 37 and 41, is pretty obvious. And then the 7 years of abundance, the brothers came to Egypt and so forth. So it's interesting to see the parallel. So there's the scene. You got the scene. Judah's made this fabulous, fabulous plea. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud. He wept aloud. And the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said unto his brethren, can you picture this? Hey guys, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? His brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Boy, I can imagine. Can you imagine? Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. He said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore, this has got to be hard to absorb. You know, they're guilty of virtually killing him, and now they find he's the ruler of the world. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Notice Joseph's mentality. He bears them no ill will. He is totally convinced this is God's plan. Boy, what a perspective. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing or harvest. There's 5 more years coming, guys. See, Joseph's point is the providential act of God is far more important than any minor act of mortal man. What you guys did, is not an issue. And God sent me before you to preserve you, a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, and tarry not. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen. Thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. Now here's a map of Egypt, to give you a rough feeling of it. I've put Cairo on the map just for a frame of reference. Obviously, the capital of Lower Egypt is Memphis, which is roughly just a little south of Cairo, where Cairo is today. The northern Upper Egypt is Thebes. The Upper Lower Egypt divide roughly where Memphis is. The Lower Egypt was the Nile Valley, very fertile, and the rest of it was up to the first cataracts of the Nile. And to give you another, the land, if you look at the Nile Delta, the northern part up there, is the most fertile region you can imagine. The best part of it is the eastern part of that, and that's Goshen, and that's where they stand. It was called, the district of Ramesses by the time you get to Exodus 1, but in any case, that's where it is, the land of Goshen. And just to give you some other references here, if you visit Egypt, the fabled temples of Karnak and Luxor, they're roughly right across the river, right across the Nile from Thebes, in effect. There's also, down at the bottom there's Elephantine Island, which is an island in the Nile that was the fortified capital, and it was in the 6th century B.C. That's probably where the ark was taken to get it away out of the hands of Manasseh, if you read in 2 Chronicles 35. And then just to give you another frame of reference, up very north, above Goshen, right where up from the Suez against the ocean is a place called Tanis. This is just a couple of cities you hear about. That is famous for a lot of reasons, but it was the place. There's a legend that the ark was hidden in Tanis. That was one of 6 different legends, but that was the one they used for the movie Indiana Jones thing, the Tanis and so forth. Just not a big thing and so forth, but for what it's worth. Let's finish it up. And behold, your eyes shall see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. See, he's speaking to him in Hebrew, first of all. That's got to rattle them, see? And ye shall tell my father all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept. And Benjamin wept upon his neck. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this scene? Moreover, he kissed all his brethren, and he wept upon them. And after that, his brethren talked with him. The fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Say unto thy brethren, This do ye, lade your beasts and go and get you into the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. And also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. The children of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave, each man, changes of raiment. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. And his father, he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away, that they departed. And he said unto them, See that ye fall not out by the way. And they went up out of Egypt, and came unto the land of Canaan, unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And the father said, Yeah, tell me another one. No, he said, and Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. Do you blame him? Can you even absorb that? I mean, you can't imagine this. They told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons, which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And he said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. But next time, we will continue the final chapter of Joseph and the migration and some exciting stuff. So let's stand for a closing word of prayer. Man, what a scene. Father, we just thank you that we too have an advocate that's the ruler of not just the world but the universe. We thank you, Father, that we too are in a very real sense in a position to be joint heirs with him. We thank you, Father, that you've gone to such extremes and that Jesus suffered so much on our behalf. We do pray, Father, you'd reignite in each of us a new hunger, a passion for your word, and open that word to our lives that we might become better stewards of the opportunities you placed before us, that we too, like Joseph, might just trust you, that we are indeed in your hands and will have need of for nothing as we commit ourselves afresh without any reservation into your hands. In the name of Yeshua, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.